Ladies and gentlemen, imagine hearing every thought around you, not just words, but fear, hatred, and darkness hidden inside people. Now imagine living like that every single day. That is where this story begins. From the very beginning, his life was never quiet. It was never peaceful. Imagine waking up and instantly hearing voices, not from outside, but from inside the minds of everyone around you. Not just words, but raw thoughts, unfiltered emotions, fear, anger, jealousy, hatred. Things people never say out loud. Things they try to hide. But for him, nothing was hidden. As a child, he didn't understand what was happening. At first, it felt like confusion. Like noise that wouldn't stop. A constant storm inside his head. He would look at someone smiling, being kind, acting normal, but at the same time, he could hear their true thoughts. Sometimes those thoughts were harmless. Other times, they were dark enough to make him step back in fear. This ability didn't make him special in a good way. It isolated him, because how do you trust anyone, when you know what they really think? In school, things became even harder. Kids laughed, joked, played like everything was simple. But for him, every interaction was exhausting. Every conversation carried a second layer, the hidden truth behind every word. A compliment could be fake. A friendship could be built on lies. And slowly, he started pulling away. Not because he wanted to be alone, but because being around people hurt. Teachers noticed something was off. Classmates thought he was strange. Some avoided him, others whispered behind his back. And the worst part, he could hear all of it. Every insult, every judgment, every negative thought aimed at him, even when no one said it out loud. That kind of pressure doesn't just disappear. It builds. It sinks deep into your mind, slowly changing the way you see the world. For him, people stopped feeling like individuals. They became sources of noise, of negativity, of emotional chaos, and the more he tried to ignore it, the louder it became. Like a curse that wouldn't let him breathe. There were moments when he wished he could just be normal. To laugh without overthinking, to talk without hearing hidden meanings, to trust someone without questioning their intentions. But that life was never meant for him. Because his ability didn't come with an off switch. And the real danger wasn't just the noise. It was what that noise was turning him into. When you're constantly exposed to the darkest parts of human thoughts, something inside you starts to shift. You begin to expect the worst. You start believing that maybe, this is what everyone truly is. That kindness is fake. That people are naturally selfish. That darkness is the real truth behind every smile. And once that belief takes root, it's hard to escape. He stood at a dangerous edge without even realizing it. Not a physical edge, but a mental one. A place where he could either hold on to his humanity, or slowly lose it. Because when the world feels like it's filled with hidden darkness, the biggest question becomes, will you fight it, or become a part of it? Everything changed the day he crossed paths with someone he should have feared the most. Until that moment, his world was simple in a painful way. People were loud, overwhelming, and filled with hidden darkness. He had already started believing that everyone carried something ugly inside them. That no one was truly different. But then, he met him. At first, it didn't feel special. Just another person in the crowd. Just another mind full of thoughts. But the moment Shin's ability touched his mind, something felt different. Not quiet, not pure, but controlled. Focused. Like a storm that had already passed but left its mark behind. This wasn't an ordinary man. This was someone who had walked through darkness, and survived it. A former killer. That realization alone should have been enough to push Shin away. Every instinct should have told him to run. Because if normal people already carried hidden darkness, then someone like this, someone who had actually lived it, should have been terrifying beyond words. And yet, he didn't run. Because for the first time, the thoughts he heard didn't confuse him. They didn't overwhelm him in the same way. There was no chaos, no constant noise clashing together. Instead, there was clarity. Calm. A strange kind of silence within the storm. It didn't make sense. How could someone with such a violent past feel more stable than ordinary people? That question stayed with him. The more he observed, the more confused he became. This man didn't act like a killer anymore. His actions were simple, almost peaceful. There was no unnecessary aggression, no hidden malice waiting to explode. Just a quiet presence, like someone who had already made a decision about who they wanted to be. And that's what pulled Shin closer. Not trust, not yet, but curiosity. Because deep down, Shin was searching for something. A reason to believe that people weren't completely consumed by their darker side. A reason to prove himself wrong. And somehow, this man became that reason. Their interactions were small at first. Nothing dramatic, just moments that slowly built something unexpected. Shin would listen to his thoughts, trying to find cracks, trying to uncover the hidden monster he was sure existed. But instead, he found something else. Restraint, control, and something even more surprising, protection. For the first time in his life, Shin didn't feel like he was drowning in someone else's mind. Instead, he felt grounded, like he could finally stand still without being overwhelmed by noise. And that feeling was new, dangerously new, because it made him question everything he believed. If someone who once lived as a killer could change, then what did that mean for the rest of the world? What did it mean for him? This connection wasn't built on words. It wasn't built on trust or friendship at first. It was built on observation, on silent understanding, on moments where Shin realized that this man was no longer what his past defined him to be. But the past doesn't disappear so easily. Shadows don't just vanish, and even though this man had stepped away from that life, it was still following him. Waiting, watching, ready to pull him back at any moment. Shin could feel it, that tension beneath the surface. That quiet danger that hadn't fully gone away. And yet, he stayed. Because for the first time in his life, he wasn't just hearing darkness. He was seeing someone fight against it. And without realizing it, Shin made a choice. Not to run, but to follow. Even if that path led him straight into the very darkness he had always feared. No matter how far you run, some shadows don't lose your scent. For a while, it almost felt like things were changing. Like maybe, just maybe, the past could stay buried. Shin found himself adjusting to a life that was quieter than anything he had known before. Not silent, never silent, but calmer. Manageable. The constant storm inside his head had softened, just enough for him to breathe. But peace like that doesn't last long when your life is tied to something darker. Because the past isn't just a memory, it's a presence. And soon, it started creeping back in. At first, it was subtle. A strange feeling, a tension in the air that Shin couldn't ignore. His ability picked up fragments, unfamiliar thoughts drifting too close, too sharp, too focused. These weren't ordinary people. Their minds didn't carry the usual noise of everyday life. Instead, they were precise, cold, purpose-driven, dangerous. Shin recognized that pattern immediately. These were people who didn't hesitate. People who acted. People who had one goal, and nothing else mattered. And just like that, the fragile peace around him began to crack. The past wasn't gone. It was hunting. The realization hit him hard. It didn't matter how much someone changed, how far they walked away from their old life, the world they left behind doesn't forget. It doesn't forgive. It waits. And when it returns with purpose. Shin started noticing more signs. Footsteps that lingered too long. Eyes that watched without blinking. Thoughts that carried intent so sharp, it felt like a blade pressing against his mind. These weren't coincidences. This was a pattern forming. A net tightening. And the worst part, he knew exactly who they were after. It wasn't him, not yet, but he was standing right next to the target. That truth created a new kind of fear inside him. Not the overwhelming noise he grew up with, but something deeper. Something heavier. The kind of fear that doesn't scream, it stays quiet and slowly takes over. Because now, he wasn't just dealing with random darkness. He was standing in the path of something intentional. Something that was coming closer with every passing moment. And no matter how much he wanted to believe things would be okay, his ability wouldn't let him lie to himself. The thoughts he heard made one thing clear. This wasn't going to end peacefully. The people from that past weren't coming to talk. They were coming to finish something. And suddenly, Shin found himself at a crossroads he never asked for. He could walk away. He could disappear, escape before things got worse. That option was still there, for now. But leaving wouldn't erase what he had seen. It wouldn't erase what he had started to understand. Because for the first time, Shin wasn't just a victim of the noise around him. He was aware, fully aware of the danger closing in. And awareness comes with responsibility. That's what made it harder. Because walking away now wouldn't just mean saving himself. It would mean turning his back on someone who had already fought their way out of darkness once. Someone who was about to be dragged back into it. The pressure began to build again. Not from the outside, but from within. His thoughts became louder, sharper. Questions started forming, each one heavier than the last. What kind of person would he become if he ran? What kind of person would he become if he stayed? The past was no longer something distant. It was here, breathing, watching, waiting, and no matter what choice he made next, there was no going back to the life he had before. There comes a moment in every story where running is no longer an option. For Shin, that moment didn't arrive all at once. It built slowly, piece by piece, until there was nowhere left to hide. The tension, the fear, the constant awareness of danger, it all led to a single, unavoidable truth. He had to choose, not between safety and danger, but between who he was, and who he could become. For most of his life, Shin had been reacting, surviving, enduring the noise, the overwhelming flood of thoughts that never gave him peace. His ability controlled him, it shaped his world, forced him into isolation, and pushed him away from everything that felt normal. He was always on the outside, looking in. But now, things were different. Now, he wasn't just observing the darkness in others. He was standing in front of it, facing it, and that changes a person. Because once you're face to face with something dangerous, something real, you can't pretend it doesn't exist anymore. You can't close your eyes and hope it passes. You either step back, or step forward. And both choices come with a cost. If he stepped back, he could protect himself. He could go back to running, to hiding, to surviving on his own. It would be painful, lonely, but familiar. Safe in its own way. But deep down, he already knew the truth. That kind of life wasn't really living. It was just existing. On the other hand, stepping forward meant something far more dangerous. It meant accepting the risk. Accepting the fear. Accepting that he might get hurt, or worse. It meant standing beside someone whose past was still chasing them, whose life was anything but normal. It meant walking into the darkness, willingly. And that's what made the decision so heavy. Because Shin wasn't just choosing a path. He was choosing himself. The version of himself that would emerge from this moment. Would he become someone who runs from fear? Or someone who stands in front of it? His ability, the same power that once felt like a curse, started to feel different. Not easier, not lighter, but clearer. For the first time, he wasn't just hearing chaos. He was understanding it, reading intentions, seeing threats before they fully formed. It was still overwhelming, but now it had purpose. And that purpose gave him something he had never truly felt before. Control, not over others, but over his own choice. That realization changed everything, because strength isn't just about power. It's about what you decide to do when you're afraid. It's about standing your ground even when every instinct tells you to run. Shin's heart was racing, his mind was loud, every warning signal inside him was screaming to step away, to avoid what was coming. But there was something stronger than fear now. A decision, a quiet, steady decision that formed in the middle of all that chaos. He wasn't going to run anymore. Not this time, not when it actually mattered. Because if he kept running, he would never escape the darkness anyway. It would always find him, in different forms, in different people. There was no safe place from something that existed inside the world itself. But maybe, just maybe, there was a way to face it, and that's where his journey truly began. Not as someone cursed by his ability, not as someone hiding from the world, but as someone willing to stand between darkness and the people it tries to consume. Even if it meant risking everything, even if it meant becoming something new. Because sometimes, the only way to protect your humanity is to step into the very thing that threatens to take it away. And so, Shin's journey teaches us something deeper than any battle or chase could show. It's not just about reading minds, facing killers, or surviving darkness, it's about the choices we make when the world feels overwhelming. It's about whether we let fear define us, or whether we rise above it to protect what truly matters. Shin could have run, could have let the shadows control him, but instead he chose courage. He chose to face the danger, to walk alongside someone with a haunted past, and to embrace the responsibility that came with his gift. In the end, it's a story of transformation, how even the most isolated, burdened, and broken soul can find purpose in the darkest of paths. Shin's power didn't just reveal the minds of others, it revealed the strength within himself. And that strength is something every one of us can relate to, in our own battles and choices. Because sometimes, the true hero isn't the one who never fears, but the one who keeps moving forward, even when fear is louder than hope. And in the quiet after the chaos, Shin discovered that facing the darkness within and around him was the only way to truly see the light.